Welcome to Docs Talk, episode 46. Hope everyone is having an awesome summer. Today we have Samuel Stow. Sam is an engineer turned functional movement and gait specialist. He came up with an idea called the functional step, which involves using the gluteal muscles when walking. It turns out a lot of us don't engage those muscles, and it's the reason we get tired and have higher risk of injury, back pain, tendonitis, other problems. Sam is such an interesting individual. He holds multiple world records, and he's so passionate about this idea of correct posture and gait. I think we all can learn something. If you're looking to improve athletic performance, this can help. If you're looking to improve balance and stability, this can also help. You can get his book on Amazon, also his website. As always, if you like our videos, hit the like and subscribe button. We'd love to hear your feedback. Without further ado, here's our interview with Samuel Stow. Sam, welcome to Two Docs Talk. We're so glad to have you. And could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, Rob. Thank you. Yeah, I'm Sam. I'm an ultra runner. I'm a movement trainer and a running coach. And yeah, I've got a slightly different background. So I come from studying aerospace engineering, where I did a thesis on cycling biomechanics. And I've always been very interested in understanding more about how to get the most out of myself, in particular as a sports person. I've worked as a software engineer for 10 years, including time at Google. But I've found that I've been more and more drawn to working with people to help them understand movement and enjoying movement the way that I have always enjoyed it, because I've done sports for 20 odd years. And I've managed to break 5 world records in the process in running oriented things. But yeah, I love helping people, just find joy in moving and, activity.
We live in Colorado Springs now in California. I had a lot of patients that they're runners, and or because of the high altitude, they come train there, and have quite a few patients. They do their Leadville 100, and the runner is always a very, very challenging, very interesting patient, because their nutrition, their habits, their psyche is very, very different than anybody else. So you have to work with them. So what made you interested in the running? Because of your running, or this physiology of this kind of new concept? At least I come across it. What were you interested in? How you started to? And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So I actually I did a practical time working in Germany for 6 months, and when I was working over there, I did a lot of drinking and not a lot of exercise. So I got quite overweight. So when I came back, I was like, I need to get fit and healthy. So I started running, swimming, and cycling at the same time, where I was living in Victoria, in Australia, is a very sort of active area. And yeah, just got really interested in sort of endurance exercise to help me lose weight to start with. But then I also found that it helped me be more productive in my studies. And yeah, there was lots of other benefits, and I just sort of have been doing it ever since.
And how does it start from let us know how that... with your dad and everything, how this physiology, yours is different than other people. Tell us a little bit about that.
About how my physiology is different from others, or?
Yeah. How does you coach people that they run better for longer time? And I did some Tai Chi. When I look at that, it seems like the posture is so important. And it was very interesting to see how you teach the people the posture and the position as you said, enjoy running and running longer time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is probably where it's worth me kind of delving into a little bit of the sort of underpinning. So, my central thesis is that the human body is a structure that it works optimally in a certain way, right? And if you're a kid, I use my 4-year-old and my 7-year-old daughters as prime examples. They're very strong and they look beautiful when they move. They're very active, and they have what I would call engaged posture. So everything is sort of working in synergy together. And I think that one thing that happens over time is that as we get more involved in life and we stop being able to just do whatever we want, run around outside and play on playgrounds, we spend a lot more time sitting, and we can end up getting into more of what I call a passive posture. And when you're in this passive posture, what's typically happening is your core is not working, your glutes are not engaged, and you're generally starting to train your body into a different type of posture than what we normally start with, And so when you have that, you start to get a bit compromised, because if you imagine you build up this pattern of having this passive posture and like lack of awareness. And there's actually a term like gluteal amnesia, right? Where you completely forget that your glutes even exist. And so then if you take someone with that situation and they go out to start to exercise again, because they've usually probably had a period of sedentary lifestyle, and then they go, better go and start getting fit and healthy, then the chances that they're going to be able to move well with that fully engaged active posture and, you know, the synergy of the whole structure working together is not high.
So how did you come up with this? Where did this come from? Did you try it out in running, or did you watch other people, or so engaged in the glutes? And you shared that video with me of your dad, and that kind of, I think that really resonated with me. We'll share that with our viewers, because that really shows how this all works. But could you go through it and how you came up with this?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a process of many years of evolution. You know, I started working on my own running form in 2009, so that's like 16 years ago now, and I've been obsessed with it, you know, because I've come from a triathlon oriented, you know, multi-sport background, so I know how important technique and biomechanics is in terms of helping you be more efficient. You know, kayaking is one of my great examples. Like, if you kayak with your arms, you're going to get tired very quickly, but if you learn to use your core and your whole body, you can be very efficient and you can actually do it for a long time. So I didn't see any reason why running would be any different. And I've always wanted to be a better runner. So I've always just been working on how can I get better, you know, with the limited time that I have, because, you know, I work full time, I have kids and all this stuff, right? And then, you know, I like to share things. So I've always kind of been drawn to sharing and teaching others. And I've always had that opportunity. Like at Google, they actually have a Googler to Googler program. So you can just teach anybody who wants to learn what you know. As long as someone wants to learn, you can teach it. So I did that, and just from there I've just always been teaching, and the process of teaching has given me more and more insights into what's needed. And yeah, my dad was kind of a really good insight for me, because he tore a calf muscle in his when he was trying to push a boat. So he was trying to push the boat and he tore his calf muscle. And the reason that happened is he was pushing through his calves because he has no glute awareness. And because that was very clear to me when I actually sat down with him. I was not sat down, but I tried to get him to do a squat and like tell me if he could feel his glutes. And he said, no, I can't feel them. So that's when I knew, like, okay, well, that's the problem. We've got to get you to feel that before we can do anything else, you know?
And when somebody comes to you, how do you train it? Can you go to like an ABC of for audience to get engaged in that posture?
Yeah, it's definitely, you know, I think like a really good example, like, is just like you can do it, you know, anytime you're sitting. Like, I imagine a lot of people are sitting listening to this, right? Is like just the idea of active versus passive sitting. So passive sitting is you're kind of slouched, your shoulders are often forward, your head can be forward, your core's not engaged, you know, you've got no awareness of anything in your posture. But then active sitting is you kind of think about being tall, opening up your shoulders, you know, leveling your pelvis a bit more, get your core more engaged. And that might be very unfamiliar for some people. So if I'm working with someone, you know, the first thing I'll do is assess their level of body awareness by going through some postural stuff, and then test whether their glutes, whether they can feel their glutes in, you know, versus standing versus sitting. And then that kind of gives me a baseline to know, well, do I need to start by getting them to just feel awareness or can we start moving into some more functional movement patterns?
So how does it work? What do you go through this? Well, you're in Australia, so I assume most of our listeners are probably not going to see you, face to face. But how does this all work?
Yeah. No, I've been fortunate. You know, I think especially with the whole COVID situation, a lot of people got very used to working remotely, so that probably works in my favor. Because yeah, I've been fortunate to work with people all over the world, and you know, the idea of, you know, exactly what I just told you, I can tell you that and you can try that and you can give me feedback, you know, remotely like this. So I don't have to be here looking at you. And that's probably one of the most important things that I'm trying to get across to people, is that it's not so much about what it looks like, it's more about what it feels like, you know? Like, it helps sometimes for me to have that visual feedback, but I could probably give you all the audio prompts over the phone and just ask you, does it feel right? And you'd probably get majority of it that I wanted you to get, because it's more about that internal process of like, oh, okay, this muscle needs to do this, you know, and then this is what it's supposed to feel like. Because when we're moving, we're not thinking about what we look like, you know, we're thinking about what we feel. And that's what we need to train, is how we feel, so that we can feel better when we do it, you know?
And your posture is not only for, of course, sitting, it's for mostly for running as well. I saw your YouTube that is very nicely, you balance your head and your body mostly on your glute med there, so you can be more comfortable. Is that correct?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, so I'm just using active sitting as a good example, because the majority of us spend more time sitting than anything else. But clearly, when we're walking and running, we need to, be aware of the posture, and aware of like which muscles are engaged, and it becomes, the sequencing and like just the whole movement pattern. There's always this kind of idea that, oh, we run the way we run, but we only run the way we run because we don't know any better. So if we learn how to move better by taking the example of using posture when we're sitting and when we're standing, then we can bring that into when we're walking and when we're running. Because really, the way we move across our entire life, it's not like we have one way of moving for walking and one way of moving for running. It's all the same thing. And so if our posture and our engagement in one activity is lacking, then it's likely to be lacking in these other activities too.
Do you think this could help prevent falls, especially in the elderly?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely one of my passion areas. And that's like, I've been lucky that my parents have been so game to be my test subjects, because they've been a good catalyst for me to show that this works in, their 70 plus year olds. And I've had other clients come to me in their 60s and 70s. And I think that your body doesn't break as you get older. I think that the idea is that your movement patterns and your posture gets worn in and becomes more and more, I don't know what the right word is, but compromised potentially, because you have no awareness of what you're doing, and you don't know what you should be doing to make it better. And then the more that you become into this forward flexed sort of, as I said, sort of passive, unengaged posture, the more you're kind of just forward balanced, right? And there's nothing happening. So you have an unbalanced stride. So you're not upright and you don't have any hip extension. So the likelihood of you falling over is much higher. And if you think about, being engaged versus not engaged, like if you're engaged, then you can respond more quickly. It increases responsiveness. So if there was like something uneven that you were to step on, for example, or something unexpected happen, if your muscles are already all engaged, you can much more quickly adapt. Whereas if your muscles aren't engaged, then gravity is probably going to win.
Especially with today's people that work in the office is right now as bad as smoking cigarettes for their body, because the posture, being there, lack of engagement. One time I was studying just about the back posture compared to Western versus like if you go to Africa or Asia, which they're working rice fields, stuff like that, is how you bend, how you keep yourself, you stay much healthier. But I think in West has become more relaxed, more sedentary in the office work, and I think we're losing that ideal posture, I think, at least in my opinion, to sustain a good muscle tone. So I think it's very important for us to engage that all the time, because I'm a gastroenterologist and I see lots of the work effect on my colleagues and other things, their neck and their back, and I think it's just mostly how you posture all the time, and which is easy to forget when you're stressed. Just go do things. So I think it's very, very important. Yes.
Do you advocate a standing desk or a treadmill desk? I'm curious how you work and do these things.
I'm lucky now that my work doesn't usually involve me having to be at a desk for a long period of time, I'm actively teaching or running more often than I'm sitting around, which is good for me. But I used to work in a desk environment, and one thing I note about myself in particular is I think better when I'm moving. So I'm better off, and the advent of like AI transcription has been a game changer for me, because I can just speak my thoughts, transcribe it, and then use that information for something. But when it comes to being constrained to being in a desk type environment, I think that standing desks are a really good tool. And I advocate for variety. Like if you think about the way we're supposed to live, we're not supposed to just be in one position statically for hours on end. We want to have a variety. So standing, sitting, squatting, like whatever, having this variety of things. And, again, like Google is an amazing environment because they study the hell out of everything, and they're always coming up with how can we make this better so that we get more out of our employees. And they have like a lot of, apart from obviously everyone has the opportunity to have a standing desk, which will adjust so you can sit and stand. You also have all these sort of breakout areas and, other areas that you can go to so you can sit in a different way, or you can walk around, like there's just lots of different ways that you can work. So you're not just stuck in one posture all the time.
Do you have, I watch your YouTube. It's just how simply you position your hip and back, and that make you more there. Is there a way you can demonstrate it, or do you have a visual aid that we can put on for the audience to see how they can use that in their walk? And
yeah. Like the most simple tools are the most effective ones, I find. Like a wall or a broom handle can be really useful ways of feeling like the difference between what a very good posture might be versus what maybe your current posture is. Not to be mean, but if you put yourself up against the wall and you put your heels against the wall and then you put your bum against the wall, and then you go, okay, I need to get my shoulders against the wall, I need to get the back of my head against the wall, so they want you completely vertical. For a lot of people, they're going to find that very uncomfortable. And what a lot of people will do is they'll tip their head back so that the back of their head touches the wall, but then they're going to be looking up. And obviously when we're standing straight, we're not supposed to be looking up. We want to be looking straight. So in order to fix that, you've got to tuck your chin in and you've got to look straight, but you've got to pull your head back. And that feels very uncomfortable for some people because we get this sort of very forward head posture. So pulling your head back and tucking your chin feels very awkward. And then the other thing is with your shoulders, what you'll find is that your shoulders roll forward. And so when you're pushing up against the wall, you want to think about opening up your shoulders. You kind of think about facing your palms forward. And that way, when you open your shoulders, so that whole posture then becomes like shoulders open, the back of your head is touching the wall. And then you can start to think about your pelvis, right? So what a lot of people will have is anterior pelvic tilt, so forward pelvic tilt. And what that does is it hyperextends your spine, which puts pressure on your lower back, and it can cause neck pain as well, So if you actually think about get your chest down and lift your pelvis up, engage your core, think like you're pushing the lower back against the wall, or you're doing like a mini ab crunch. That's what, like an engaged posture feels like from the hips up. And, for a lot of people, that's going to feel quite foreign.
And how do you do the breathing through this? What's, do you correlate with breathing your posture as well?
Yeah, I don't start with that because, even just explaining posture in the way I just did, plus adding some more stuff, getting them to understand, like movement mechanics and getting their glutes to work and all this, it can be a lot, right? So it's a lot for people to take on. So I'm like, well, this is just a foundational understanding that you need to have. But when we start doing movement drills and so on, you just have to kind of use them as corrections if you're not feeling it in the right way. But yeah, breathing is very important, obviously. And I do breath coaching as well, but it's usually like at a later stage because I can't teach everything at once. And yeah, all breathing is all about the diaphragmatic breathing. And I'm sure you're very aware, but basically when you use your diaphragm, it does help with engagement, like it actually increases pressure on your core active sort of cavity area. So that actually enhances engagement of your core. So it's a very good thing. Plus, there's all these other benefits of breathing, like it helps you activate your parasympathetic nervous system, keeps you more calm. And if you're more calm, you're more able to be more rational. You're not as likely to tense up, because if you tense up, then things will start to go back to what you consider to be normal. And so it makes it harder for you to make corrections to, your natural resting state.
Any risks to this, or precautions or issues that you've encountered in folks who are trying this for the first time? And it's got to, I'm going to try this standing up on the wall after we're done here. It's got to feel different for a lot of folks when they first try this.
Yeah, well, I haven't had anybody come back to me and say that they've gotten injured following my advice. Pretty much everybody that's ever given me feedback is like they feel better. And the reason I started to realize that I was on the right path is I was teaching people running. And then they were all coming back to me saying, oh, my posture feels better all the time now. When I'm walking, my posture feels better. I had a guy in his 60s say, I've been to physios, I've been to chiros, I've done all these different strength things, blah, blah, blah. And then I just started doing your drills and your training. And like now my posture's better, and I couldn't achieve that with all this other stuff, So what I'm trying to do is help people understand how their bodies are supposed to move, because it comes back to this whole idea of structural integrity, right? So if you think about like a Coke can, and if you think about how strong a Coke can is if you put something on top of it, like you can almost stand on a Coke can and it won't collapse, right? So that's like because it's structurally very strong in that way. So it can handle a lot of load like that. Whereas if you put weight on a Coke can and then you press into the side of it, it's going to buckle immediately. And I kind of use that as an analogy to our own bodies, in that our bodies can handle a lot of load if you load them in the right way. But if you load them in the wrong way, they're going to break quite quickly, because they're a structure like any other structure, albeit an incredibly complicated structure. So this has been trial and error for me, as I said, over many, many years. And every little correction that I've made has been an improvement, So that's where I come to is like, okay, well, because I've run, I've clocked nearly 35,000 kilometers on Strava. And so I've come to this point where I've run this much, and like now I run without really having any injuries, because I've had all the injuries and I've realized what I was doing wrong and how do I address that,
Yeah. And in fact, a lot of the folks are recommending not running. And if you've seen this data, it's better, they're recommending weightlifting and other things, just because running is associated. It's as my understanding, it's one of the highest risks of, especially as we get older.
Yeah. Like the injury rate of runners is high. It's very high. And, I think it's partly because we don't necessarily know where to start, and you get two types of runners. You get ones who are like, just like very stubborn, and they're never going to stop, and they're just going to push through, and that they're probably either going to figure it out or they're going to get injured, and then you get the other type who are like, I like to try running, and then they go, oh, this is really painful, and then they might get injured, and they're like, I'm not going to bother with that again. That's my experience. But if you learn how to start with movement as a general topic, like I've been discussing, and you can learn to walk using that whole system in an integrated and strong and effective way, then you can take that into running, and running doesn't become the same level of risk as it currently is for most people.
I noticed in your video that seems like you're taking shorter steps compared to bigger step with that technique. Am I correct?
It's like, you've got to learn to walk. Literally, you got to learn to walk before you can run. And the same concept applies to speed, right? And this is probably where a lot of people get it wrong, is they think that running has to feel a certain level of effort. And so then they'll start to run and they'll have to think, oh, well, if it doesn't hurt, if I'm not getting out of breath, if I don't feel like I'm breaking a sweat, then it's not running. So they'll try and run too fast, and that just increases load. And also, if you really don't know what you're trying to focus on from a biomechanical perspective and from a feeling perspective, then it's hard for you to make, corrections or really like feel like you are doing anything useful. You would just be like, well, if I'm going slower than a certain speed, I might as well be walking. But if you understand, okay, biomechanically, and like this is the movement pattern I'm going for, then you can actually run at a really low speed. And that's what I've done with my mum, who's 70. Like she started trying to do the couch to 5K, and she's like, well, when I do the 3-minute efforts, it gets really hard. I'm like, you're going too fast, slow down. And I don't even care about the whole couch to 5K thing. I just want you to learn how to run sustainably. So once she was ready, because she already knew how to run because I taught her, once she learned how to slow right down so that she was moving at a pace that was sustainable for her fitness level, then it became not a problem, and she could go for 20 minutes nonstop and feel really good about it.
That's pretty good. She's in her 70s?
She's 70 now. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
okay.
But yeah, and she runs barefoot. She likes to go barefoot, and she's had a partial knee replacement. So, I'm very fortunate that my parents are really like the best examples that I've got of how effective this can be.
What is the effect of the barefoot versus when in sneakers or running shoes?
Yeah, well, I think I'm very passionate about like being able to feel your whole body and your whole posture from the ground up. And I do feel like learning how to move is best done barefoot. Or, if you have to go to a gym and they enforce wearing footwear, the minimal shoes, like there's a company called Zero Shoes, there's Vivo Barefoot. Some people like the 5-finger ones, any kind of shoe that doesn't have like massive amounts of padding and is just flexible so your foot can be like a not uncompromised structure. Like, because if you think about it, like I've talked about, like if our human body, if you take me in my word, like the human body is a structure that's designed to work in a certain way, then if you let the foot do what the foot's supposed to do when it's in contact with the ground, you're going to get the best outcomes. Whereas if you start to put all this sort of like extra rubber under there and postings, and then you squish it at the front and various other things, then you're already starting from a compromised foundation.
And my son does he's a rock lifter, and he feels that when he's barefoot, he has more power and can engage the ground and lift much heavier than any time that he wears shoes. And that was an interesting concept. Says he feels that he can more engage and can get more powerful when he's barefoot. So probably similar concept.
If you could comment a little bit on plantar fasciitis. This is so common. I see it like I'm an oncologist, but I diagnose it probably a couple times a month in my practice. I'm like, someone has foot pain. I'm like, yep, that's plantar fasciitis. Can that be something from improper posture and how we're walking?
Yeah, it's not so much posture. I mean, there is an element of posture, because if your posture, it's not posture, it's biomechanics. But if the angles of your hips and your knees are in the wrong way, then your glutes won't work very effectively, and you'll put the load more in your quads and your calves, right? And another way you can think about this is running and jumping are not really different, right? Running is basically jumping from one foot to the other. And if you get an average person to jump, just do some jumping for me, there's a very high chance that they're going to jump using their calves, right? Very low chance that they're going to jump using their glutes. But if you tell someone you've got to jump onto a 4-foot high box, most people aren't going to be able to do it. But the people who are going to be able to do it are going to be jumping using their glutes, because you can't jump that high with using your calves. Do you know what I mean? So power and efficiency are the same thing. They're just, one's high effort, one's low effort. But if you're using your glutes, then you're efficient. Whereas if you're using your calves, then you're prone to injury. And most people, if they can stop overstriding, which is what most people will start doing when they run, by basically doing an exaggerated walking motion, throwing their leg out in front and doing heavy heel striking. A lot of people go, oh, that's bad. I don't want to do that. I want to increase my cadence. So then they'll start running on the balls of their feet, because a lot of people are like, running on the balls of your feet is better. And then they're using their calves, right? And if you think about running using your calves, the load is going through your foot your Achilles and your calf. That's where all the load is. It's not going into where the load is best handled, which is in your core and your glutes. So that area becomes prone to injury, like I talked about, like the Coke can analogy before. And where the injury occurs is basically the weakest link in that area. So some people get lots of calf problems, some people get Achilles problems, and some people get plantar fasciitis. So they're all like the same problem from a biomechanical perspective.
What about your balance when you're running? The center of your gravity, is that something that you should keep the center back or forward? So what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think your gravity, the center of gravity is what you're using to move you. Like when you're running in a balanced way, then you use your center of gravity to move you forward. So if you stop, then your center of gravity is directly above, your feet, basically. But if you are moving forward, then your center of gravity is in front of, if you were to take a snapshot or like an average of where your feet are versus where your head is going to be slightly in front. So you've got an overall forward lean, which is moving you forward. And so I use, I've got a true form treadmill, which is a manual treadmill, which basically it's like a curved treadmill, and you run on the curve, which is the slope pit. And that's what makes the treadmill move, right? It's landing on the slope, and then the slope goes down, and then you land and it keeps moving. So there's no motor. And if you get an average person to start running on that, they find it very disconcerting, and they lose balance very quickly, because they'll put their foot out in front of them, and then the slope will move, and then their foot will go behind them, and they'll fall off balance, and they'll be like, whoa, this feels really gnarly. But if you learn how to run balanced, which is like basically your posture doesn't change, the angle that you're moving you're using to move forward is what moves you forward, then every time you land, you're balanced, So you just balanced every time you land. So therefore you're never out of balance, even if the whole ground is moving underneath you. And that's why I use that treadmill to teach people how to run, because once they can feel balance there, then they've got a much better chance of being able to run well.
Well, thank you so much, Sam, for this. This is so interesting. Do you have any final comments, and how can our listeners find you?
Yeah, no worries. I think my general comment is that I hope that people have found interest in thinking about this, because I do feel like, I teach plenty of people, but I also have like a community, like I've got an app with quite a few thousand people in there. And I get people posting and commenting back to me all the time that I've never met, that even just some of the ideas have like profound impact on their running, but that can also impact movement, and that's really my goal, is especially when we're talking about seniors. I really would love to be helping, the aging population, because we do have quite an aging population. And as you said, we've got a lot of increased risk of falls. We have like an increased prevalence of lack of mobility, a lot of, sedentary lifestyle. And I think that if people find movement painful, then they're not going to want to do it, Whereas if we can help them learn awareness, so that they can start to understand, oh, well, this is why it's painful, Like I had a 70-something-year-old the other day who has a lot of pain. She's got like Achilles problems. She's got like migraines and all of this stuff. And I just did some basic tests on her, and she couldn't feel her glutes at all. And it's no wonder, like if her whole body is compromised and she's not able to integrate everything, then these areas where she's getting pain are going to get tight. And that tightness then creates overload. And especially if you've got tightness around the back of your head and around, the muscles around your head, that's what can create, I'm not saying it's the only cause, but can be a big reason why you might get a migraine, right? So if people start to become more aware that these problems that they have are related to them not having this awareness of what their body is doing and how to use it, then they can start to take steps to fix it. Do you know what I mean? Like to go, oh, actually, hold on, this is what I need to do. And so then you can actually have agency and take control over your health and say, well, if I actually start to learn on these very basic fundamental things about how my body's supposed to work, then they can have an impact over time and start to enjoy it. And, you know, it's sort of, that's the way I can tell if it's being successful, is because it's sort of self-reinforcing. Because once you understand these things and you start to feel them, you're like, oh, that feels good, I'm going to do more of it. Then you kind of want to do more. So it's like learning to want to do exercise rather than forcing yourself to do it. That's kind of my main goal.
I think we should be teaching this in PE. We call it physical education here in the States. And a lot of places have eliminated PE, but this needs to be like front and center, like how to move.
Yeah, I know. It's funny, isn't it, that education seems to miss some of the just most important things. But it's not like, it's taken me a long time to figure out how to do this. And it's obviously not, you know, obvious to many people. But I think for me, it's become obvious. So yeah. And like, I can give you another analogy I wanted to touch on because it's really insightful for me, is that I actually had a 13-year-old boy that I taught a few months ago, I think. And he played soccer or AFL, one of those sports, but he ran very heavy, you know, like he was very heavy and impactful on his joints, because like that heaviness is associated with a lack of engagement. It's like what I was talking about before. And so I showed him what he needed to do. And the good thing about kids is that they're very adaptable. You know, usually they're not that far gone that you can't fix them, but it depends on how responsive they are to giving the prompts and the feedback to implement it. But I had a pretty good outcome with him. We went for a run afterwards and I was coaching him through it. And afterwards, when we were talking to his dad about how it all went, he's like, yeah, it felt good. Like it felt a lot better. And then he actually said, that's how I used to run. Yeah, that's what would really hit me, is that, these kids are forgetting, you know, they just forget what they already know.
I think it's part of our, we grow on the play on the playground, and we know, just know how to do this stuff. And then we start, school, we're sitting all day, and it just we lose a lot of these movements. You're right.
Yeah. And I mean, if I look at my daughters, I'm just like, we're born knowing what to do, but, through the life, we kind of lose these patterns and these habits and just develop habits that are not serving us. But we forget, we don't really know until like what I'm trying to do, how to fix it.
It's very important that, we live one life, and for longevity, I think the physiology beside the nutrition, everything is put together. And I think with today's fast-paced life of, being in class all the time, then trying to make a living and try to go from one to the next, you completely forget about your posture or your motion, then all of this thing builds up with headaches and plantar fasciitis and all of that. So know that this is a great step, and you can do it at any time you want, whether you're office or walk and run. That's
the thing that's so impactful about doing it this way, is that I had this feedback from multiple people. It's like, I don't need to go to a gym. You don't need to do anything. Like, you literally can just do it anytime you want, because it's just like an awareness thing of something that we do all the time anyway. I forgot to answer your question, like where can people find me? So I better say that. So my website is poprunning, poprunning.com.au. And if you go to poprunning.com.au/book, there you can get my book. I've got like a $5 book bundle. And so I've got a whole book, which is about my whole philosophy and my journey as an ultra runner, and how I impart movement, breathing, and mindset into that. But it also talks a lot about the movement side of things. And the bundle comes with a few bonus videos, and it also has my glute activation workshop, which is really the fundamental thing, which will get, a lot of people a long way into understanding how to use their glutes. And then the other way people can find me when I'm quite active is on Instagram at sam.poprunning, or one word there. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I highly recommend the videos, because watch a few of your videos. I personally learn a lot just by watching the body motion, and so they're simple and they're very what's that educational. So I'm sure many audience they will enjoy that.
Oh, well, thank you very much for giving me your time today, guys, and I appreciate it.
Thank
No
you.
problem. Thank you.